This episode is brought to you by Ridge Wallet. What's up guys, Jared here. If you've checked Twitter or turned on the news recently, you might have noticed a theme.
We are seeing President Trump's odds of re-election starting to dwindle quite significantly.
And this will be over by January, one way or the other.
So from the consumer side, very, very strong. And that's really a driver of the overall profit economic forecast.
How far will COVID spread? Who's going to win the election? When will the economy crash? There's no shortage of people who claim to have hacked the future. In the 70s, people claimed they could predict the stock market based on who won the Super Bowl, and you don't need to think that far back to remember this.
Republicans are not going to win this next election.
Or this.
That the coronavirus will follow the same path and go away with the arrival of warmer weather in the summer.
Or who can forget Jim Cramer with this doozy.
Should I be worried about Bear Stearns in terms of liquidity and get my money out of there? No, no, no.
Right before 2008's financial crash.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
We're surrounded by very bad predictions, whether they're from your uncle, teachers, news personalities, even people with fancy degrees. So what can you do to not fall for the snake oil of charming political punditry? And who can you believe? Welcome to this Wisecrack Edition on predictions. What do they know? Do they know things? Let's find out. But before we continue, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at Ridge. The Ridge is a light and sleek wallet that is designed to help you get rid of your old lumpy leather wallet. The Ridge wallet is the last wallet you may ever need since each one is made from extremely durable materials like carbon fiber, burnt titanium, and aluminum. In fact, they're so durable that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. It holds up to 12 cards and still has room for cash. And the best part is that it's made with RFID blocking technology, so you're protected from digital pickpockets. I love that it's just so slim and I don't have to go out with awkward dad pockets every time I want to go to the store. It also looks really stylish, and you can get your own wallet in over 30 different colors and styles. Right now, you can get your own Ridge wallet for 10% off by going to ridge.com/wisecrack and using the code Wisecrack at checkout. And now, back to the show. Let me start by introducing you to Philip Tetlock, a psychologist who has spent much of his career studying political forecasting. Over 20 years, he tracked 80,000 predictions made by almost 300 people, all of whom made a living offering insights into the future of politics and the economy. And what he found was, well, pretty terrible. Tetlock measured the predictions that could be put on some kind of scale, like, will there be more of something, less of something, or will it stay the same? Today's version of these predictions might sound like, will the war in Syria get better, worsen, or stay the same? One might also predict if support for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, respectively, will increase, decrease, or again, stay the same. You might expect someone with a political science background to excel here. Armed with facts, they could confidently forecast what's going to happen in Syria. I, on the other hand, might wildly guess A, B, or C. But here's the thing. According to Tetlock, I'd probably beat most of the experts. That's right, Tetlock's professional predictors of the world were generally less accurate than random chance, or monkeys throwing darts, or Jared Bauer wildly guessing on a history exam. However you want to think about it. So, screw the experts? Well, not quite. Tetlock is quick to point out that while people have taken his study to mean that there are no trustworthy experts, that's not the case. They're just a small minority. But it gets worse. Tetlock found one specific kind of expert among his study: the bold predictors. People who have a theory of how the world works, are completely sure of that theory, and make daring, big predictions. Tetlock calls these people hedgehogs, and to put it bluntly, they're the worst.
I want nachos and buffalo wings, oh, and guac. Funny word, isn't it?
Let's look at political commentator and famous hedgehog Bill Kristol, a man who makes his living writing and talking about the news. He predicted Iraq would be a 2-month war.
This is going to be a 2-month war.
And that Barack Obama would not win a single primary over Hillary Clinton. In 2015, amidst the Republican campaigns, he had proclaimed peak Trump no less than 11 times. And Bill Kristol, despite all of this, has a thriving career on cable news. Kristol's bad predictions aren't an ideological issue. Tetlock found bold predicting hedgehogs equally on the left and the right.
But get ready, a storm is coming.
Though they tended towards the more extreme ends of each spectrum. And it's not just that Crystal and people like him are dum-dums on TV who don't know anything. Tetlock found as a hedgehog's knowledge increases about a specific topic, their prediction accuracy worsens. From here, we can immediately understand the problem about some of the bolder COVID predictions, that it would definitely fizzle out by April,
and that outbreak will reach its highest point in the second week of April,
or that hydroxychloroquine was a wonder drug before we all had the data.
Very powerful drug.
These so-called experts stand in stark contrast to the people we should actually be listening to. Tetlock's other kind of expert is a lot less interesting to listen to than hedgehogs like Jim Cramer or Bill Kristol. Tetlock calls them foxes. They were experts who would hem and haw about the future, considering a wide variety of data points and perspectives.
Morning, Judy. Blueberry muffin for you?
I don't know. Maybe. I can't decide.
You all right there, mate?
Okay. I've made my decision. I want to start crying.
They're not exactly crystal balls, but they have a better track record than the hedgehogs. Unlike hedgehogs, they've become more accurate as they accumulate more knowledge. But most of the time, foxes don't exactly make for entertaining cable news guests. After all, what's more fun? An expert predicting a landslide election that will forever change the nation? Or someone who likes to dive into the countless variables and uncertainty before just shrugging their shoulders and declaring that there's not enough data? But what about COVID predictions? I'm not talking about pundits on CNN, I'm talking about the scientists. It seems that, even listening to them, they're always changing their minds about how many people will get sick or die. Are these just talking heads making big, bold predictions with absolutely no scrutiny? Not quite. Obviously, holding people accountable for they were wrong about is fine and good, but to understand why COVID predictions are always changing and for good reason, I want to talk about the weather.
48 degrees in the upper northwest and 38 degrees in the Middle East.
We're actually very good at predicting the weather, so let's talk about it with a little bit of a dumbed down model. Generally, if there's a 90% chance of rain for a specific area, it will rain 9 times out of 10 and won't rain 1 out of 10 times. And because meteorologists are constantly making predictions, we can scrutinize their track record and they can improve upon it. Things get more complicated when you forecast for large areas, like when part of a city has a 100% chance of rain and the other half has a 40% chance. These probabilities will often get mushed together, but again, we're working with the very basic unit of forecasting. The important thing for weather predicting is that it relies on a model of how the weather works. A model is, like your kindergarten arts and crafts project, a smaller, more manageable representation of a much bigger and complicated reality. In the case of a meteorologist, their model might include wind patterns and pressure fronts and how these interact to figure out how likely it is that a storm system will ruin my dog pageant. Importantly, weather models and all models rely on assumptions. Models make assumptions about which variables matter and prioritize them over others to figure out a very specific outcome. Weather predictions assume, for instance, that YouTube's trending videos won't influence a storm front, and for good reason. COVID models do the same. For example, they might be less interested in the variable how many Wisecrack subscribers a state has, and more interested in the percentage of people who are social distancing. Predicting rain is a yes or no outcome that can be given a specific probability. However, when it comes to COVID, where the total number of cases can be anywhere from 0 to approximately 8 billion, it's a little less helpful and a lot harder to say there is a 1/1,000,000% chance that exactly 37 people will get infected. Instead, epidemiologists use confidence intervals, which is a fancy way of saying I'm 95% confident the amount of new cases will be between this number and that number. But like the weather, there's also the understanding that the real number could fall outside that range 5% of the time. And importantly, that number range rests on a lot of assumptions. Assumptions about how infectious the disease is, the percentage of infections mask usage could decrease, how many states will enter lockdown, how well will they enforce it, will people in Florida start having COVID parties to spread the disease? Unsurprisingly, getting every assumption right is a pretty Herculean task, especially when talking about finicky humans. As statistician George E. Box writes, all models are wrong. The practical question is how wrong do they have to be not be useful? And unlike our weather system, disease outbreaks involve people who can be influenced by your prediction and completely upend your assumptions. If your model says this will all be over next week with the assumption that everyone will stay indoors, my friends and I might declare an early victory and resume our normal practice of licking the fresh produce at Whole Foods. Don't do this. You know, something that undermines the model's assumptions. Hypotheticals aside, one example of assumptions gone wrong can be seen in the much reported prediction in April that coronavirus deaths would virtually stop in the summer. This model, put out by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, made one assumption that was lambasted by other public health experts, that the United States curve of cases would resemble that of countries like China and Italy. In some ways, this is exactly what modeling is about, condensing the complicated information into a graspable proxy. But it also rests on the assumption that the state and federal governments would act in a comparable way to other governments, that people would wear masks in a similar fashion, etc. And as you may have guessed, America doesn't act like other countries. I don't mean to compare the IMHE here to hedgehogs on the news, though. Making wrong assumptions shouldn't cast someone into prediction hell unless they do so time after time without ever pausing for reflection. Unfortunately, this is what some media outlets will have you believe, that changing a prediction is a sign of an intellectual failure. For instance, a model from Imperial College London projected that without drastic interventions, more than 500,000 Britons would die from COVID-19. Later, the scientist who led the modeling team said he expected deaths in the UK to top out at 20,000.
The fatalities would be probably unlikely to exceed about 20,000 with effectively a lockdown.
This caused one reporter to call it a remarkable turn on Twitter, while the Daily Mail ran a story on the scientist's patchy record, and the Federalist declared that he just walked back the apocalyptic prediction. But of course, there was no changing course, as the Imperial College model predicted multiple outcomes based on different assumptions. In this case, the scary number was always the government does nothing assumption, and the 20,000 dead was under the drastic government intervention assumption. And of course, any models, Imperial College or otherwise, should change their estimates as more data pours in about transmission rate of the disease, about if reinfection is possible, and so on. And here is the mark of a good predictor, and someone who likely isn't as entertaining on TV, a person who understands their assumptions about how they might possibly go wrong. It's also why you should listen to data scientists about COVID numbers even after they allegedly change their minds. Even the current IMHE prediction tool, which is publicly available, lets you tweak for certain assumptions, like the easing of lockdowns or widespread mask usage. A similar problem exists in media coverage of climate change. Scientists constantly set forth scenarios that often range from best case to worst case based on government policies or economic growth, for example, while trying to iron out all the kinks of how our insanely complicated weather system works. When these predictions are revised, people often criticize them for being wrong instead of lauding the scientists behind them for doing their job. Box wrote that, since all models are wrong, the scientists must be alert to what is importantly wrong. And whether you're making advanced computer models or just trying to give better advice, the steps are the same. You predict, see the results, and adjust the formula. And therein lies the problem with people like Crystal or whoever is giving you pandemic hot takes on Twitter. There's no iterative process. There's no accountability. As Tetlock writes, more often than not, forecasts are made and then nothing. Accuracy is seldom determined after the fact. Every day, the news media delivers forecasts without reporting or even asking how good the forecasters who made the forecasts really are. So, what should we do? Well, for one, avoid TV and maybe even YouTube. Try to figure out when people are predicting for sport, like on TV, and if they have any incentive at all to revise their bold proclamations when they're incessantly wrong. Most people don't, and I would predict the world would be a much better place if we listened to them a little less frequently, but what do I know? What do you guys think? How can we ever know who to trust? Let us know in the comments. Huge thanks to our amazing patrons for your support. Decimate that subscribe button, and as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.